The moment my brother shouted, "This house is mine now. Pack your bags," the room froze. Glasses clinked, laughter died, and I felt every eye on me as if the walls themselves were judging. My name is Marlowe Kingsley, 28 years old, and I had returned home thinking family meant sanctuary. I had no idea betrayal could taste so sharp, so sudden. That night, I learned that blood sometimes isn't thicker than greed. My parents watched silently, neither stopping him, and the air grew heavy, almost unbearable. I wanted to disappear, but something inside me refused to back down. I stared at the chandelier above, its crystals catching the dim light, reflecting pieces of my anger and disbelief back at me. The house had been ours for generations, a symbol of family legacy, and now my own brother claimed it with a grin. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms, and I felt heat rising like a storm. My mind raced, questions colliding with memories. Why now? Why him? Why me? I couldn't answer any, but I knew one thing. I would not let this moment define my story. Years of subtle dismissals and quiet betrayals flashed before my eyes. My parents had favored him since childhood, praising his achievements while I labored silently in their shadows. I had forgiven small slights, hoped for acknowledgement, and now I saw the culmination. Open theft, a declaration meant to humiliate me publicly. I wanted to scream, but I swallowed hard, forcing composure. The crowd at the party shifted uneasily, sensing the tension, and I realized that my next move would either shatter me completely or be the beginning of something far greater. My brother, Zayden, looked at me with smug triumph, thinking his words had cut deeply. But beneath my shock, a quiet fury began to simmer. This wasn't just about the house. It was about decades of neglect, favoritism, and silent resentment. I refused to let him enjoy this moment. I would rise, not in desperation, but in a calculated, unstoppable storm. I would show them all the cost of underestimating me. The realization hit like lightning. My revenge would not be petty. It would be spectacular, unrelenting, and unforgettable. I left the room for a moment, feeling the carpet under my feet like grounding energy. I needed to breathe, to think, to prepare. Anger coursed through my veins, a fiery current that refused to be ignored. Outside, the garden glimmered under string lights, an ironic serenity against the chaos inside. I could hear Zayden's laughter drifting through the windows, a taunt I refused to answer in kind. At least, not yet. I promised myself that every step of my retaliation would be intentional, precise, and emotionally devastating, leaving no room for escape. The first memory of my childhood betrayal surfaced unbidden. A winter afternoon when I had built a snow fort, proud of my creation, only for Zayden to stomp it down while my parents laughed. I had buried the humiliation then, as I buried countless other moments. Now, the scales were tipping. I understood fully that revenge wasn't just satisfaction. It was rewriting the narrative, reclaiming my story. I would not leave this house with my pride shattered. I would claim victory, but it would be a slow, meticulous, unforgettable lesson. Returning to the party, I forced myself to smile, soft and controlled, like a mask hiding the storm inside. I greeted a few relatives casually, letting them sense that I was composed, unshaken. Every step, every word was deliberate, planting seeds of curiosity and fear. I wanted them to realize, quietly, that this wasn't over. That smile became a weapon, subtle, dangerous, and utterly effective. The night stretched on, the room buzzing with idle chatter, unaware of the reckoning brewing in the quiet fire behind my eyes. Zayden approached, smug, expecting surrender. I met his gaze steadily, letting the anger simmer beneath calm, letting the world feel the weight of my control. "Do you really think this house can define me?" I asked softly, voice steady, making the question a blade. He laughed nervously, not expecting defiance, and I knew immediately that my first strike was psychological. This was not just confrontation, it was preparation. I would dismantle his confidence piece by piece, and they would all watch, helpless, as I rose from the ashes of favoritism and betrayal. The evening grew late, conversations fading, and the tension reached a peak that made the air almost visible. I excused myself and went upstairs, the silence of the hallway welcoming me like a prelude to battle. My bedroom, once a place of solace, now felt like the command center of a carefully planned campaign. I opened a journal I had kept for years, detailing grievances, observations, and strategies. Every slight, every insult, every moment of being overlooked had been recorded meticulously. It was time to transform these memories into action, into revenge that would leave no doubt of my power. I sat on the edge of my bed, pen in hand, heart pounding, thinking of how to orchestrate my return to prominence. This house, this family, this life, they had underestimated me. They had ignored the years of my resilience, the work I had poured into myself while they celebrated my brother. But tonight, the rules would change. I would show them that Marlowe Kingsley could not be ignored, could not be dismissed, and would never be powerless again. And as I closed my journal, the sound of laughter downstairs reminded me. The first move in my game of revenge was about to begin. I want to invite you to follow this story to its shocking conclusion. Every moment is designed to surprise you, evoke emotion, and keep you at the edge of your seat. Hit subscribe so you don't miss how I turn betrayal into empowerment, heartbreak into triumph, and a family feud into a story that will stay with you long after the video ends. You won't believe what comes next, and I promise every chapter will make you gasp, cry, and cheer. The next morning, I woke with a restless ache in my chest, a storm of anger and disbelief swirling in my mind. I replayed Zayden's words over and over, each syllable a dagger cutting into my pride. Memories of past slights came rushing back, the way my accomplishments were minimized, my dreams dismissed, and my opinions ignored. My parents had always celebrated his victories while overlooking mine. I felt the sting of years of favoritism, buried deep, now resurfacing with a force I couldn't ignore. Today, I promised myself, I would start shaping the path to my reckoning. I remembered my 16th birthday vividly, a party designed for Zayden. While he received the grandest gift, a vintage bike he had wanted, my modest present went unnoticed. I smiled politely, hiding the hurt, swallowing my disappointment like a practiced act. My parents clapped for him, praised him, and left me in shadows. I learned then that silence was my shield, observation my weapon. Every slight they committed became data, every favoritism noted in a mental ledger. I realized that my power didn't come from recognition. It came from preparation, strategy, and the knowledge that one day, I would tip the scales. High school brought another layer of resentment, though I kept it hidden. I excelled in debate, drama, and academics, yet my parents attended every one of Zayden's sports games while missing mine. They asked about his triumphs, his friends, his successes, but my achievements barely merited a nod. The sting of invisibility had become familiar, but it never dulled my determination. I would prove my worth, not for their praise, but for my own sense of justice. Every accolade, every scholarship, every accolade I earned was a silent rebuke to their neglect, a promise that my time to command attention would come. College amplified the divide. Zayden was the golden child, celebrated by alumni, family, and even professors. I worked nights, juggled internships, and pushed myself past exhaustion, building skills and achievements they would never acknowledge. Each ignored honor fueled the fire inside me. I recorded every injustice, every sneer, every moment I was dismissed while he was lauded. It wasn't bitterness, it was a strategy. I was learning patience, learning the long game. Every step of my rise was meticulously calculated, with the understanding that one day, the culmination of all these years would leave them speechless. Then came the first significant opportunity to strike back, though I didn't know it yet. An internship at a prestigious real estate firm opened doors to investments, networking, and exposure that Zayden could never access. I threw myself into the work, learning every detail about property, market trends, and strategic acquisitions. While Zayden wasted time on his social image, I was quietly building a foundation, brick by brick, that would make my eventual return to this house unforgettable. Every hour spent was a seed planted for the day I would confront him and claim what was rightfully mine. Summer vacations were especially brutal. Family gatherings always highlighted the inequality. Zayden flaunting his achievements, friends, and privileges while I sat quietly, simmering, unnoticed by the adults who were supposed to guide and celebrate me. I learned to mask anger with charm, to smile while silently tallying every slight. That skill would become invaluable later. When the time came to reveal my strength, my composure would be a weapon. I knew then that my revenge wouldn't be loud or impulsive. It would be precise, deliberate, and devastating in its subtlety. During my first job after graduation, I noticed the pattern repeating. Colleagues and managers who ignored my input often praised Zayden in passing references, oblivious to my actual contributions. I took notes, made connections, and documented every success, every contribution, every ignored suggestion. This meticulous record-keeping became my arsenal. I realized that knowledge, preparation, and patience could outweigh brute force. I didn't need to confront them immediately. The storm could wait. The longer I bided my time, the more devastating the eventual revelation would be, and the more satisfying the moment when they realized they had underestimated me entirely. I also cultivated a personal life that reflected my growing independence. Friends, mentors, and professional allies became a support network that Zayden could never infiltrate. They admired my skills, my intelligence, and my resilience, reinforcing the fact that my value didn't need parental acknowledgement. I learned to thrive in spaces where I was celebrated and respected, gathering momentum for the day I would assert my power. By cultivating both emotional and professional strength, I laid the groundwork for a confrontation that would leave no doubt about who deserved respect, recognition, and authority. Returning home during one particularly tense family dinner, Zayden had attempted to belittle my career, mocking a deal I had closed with a smirk. That night, I realized the full extent of my patience. I didn't need to retaliate immediately. I could let him underestimate me, grow complacent, and assume his dominance was absolute. That assumption would be his downfall. I smiled politely, nodding at his insults while mentally mapping the plan that would reclaim my home, my pride, and my family's attention in one overwhelming revelation. By the time the next family party arrived, I had quietly built influence in real estate, investments, and local philanthropy, a network that would validate my status far beyond Zayden's hollow boasts. I was ready. My entrance was deliberate, my poise absolute, and every detail of my appearance and demeanor planned to reflect the woman who had been invisible for too long. I knew this night would be the turning point, the stage where years of preparation, planning, and strategic patience would collide with the audacity of a brother who thought he could claim what was mine. The first sign that my plan was taking shape came unexpectedly. I received a call from a boutique investment firm in Chicago, offering a high-level position with the potential to acquire properties in the city. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Zayden thought he had claimed our family home, I was quietly building an empire that could dwarf his sense of entitlement. Every detail of my acceptance, every step toward establishing credibility, was deliberate. I knew that when the time came to confront him, it wouldn't just be words. It would be undeniable power, wealth, and proof that I had risen above neglect. I packed my bags and moved temporarily to Chicago, feeling both exhilarated and cautious. I immersed myself in networking events, mentorship meetings, and high-stakes deals. Every person I met became a potential ally or source of knowledge. While my family remained oblivious, I learned the subtleties of negotiation, strategy, and influence. I kept careful notes, documenting interactions and mapping opportunities for the future. This phase was as much about intelligence gathering as personal growth. I wanted to return home with undeniable authority, a presence so commanding that my brother's smug confidence would crumble under the weight of evidence and accomplishment. During my first major project, I encountered skepticism, subtle undermining, and condescension from colleagues, reminding me of home. I smiled, kept my composure, and let results speak. Each contract closed, each deal won, each milestone achieved was logged meticulously. I realized that revenge wasn't just emotional, it was logistical, requiring careful accumulation of proof and influence. Every victory was a step toward the ultimate confrontation. I was learning patience and precision, skills my brother had never valued. By the time I returned home, I would not only have resources but credibility, recognition, and a narrative that would force my parents and brother to reckon with my success. Weeks turned into months, and the world I built in Chicago became increasingly impressive. I gained access to high-profile investors, exclusive properties, and local media exposure. My confidence grew alongside my influence, and I began crafting a long-term strategy. I studied my family from afar, noting patterns, weaknesses, and habits. Zayden's arrogance was predictable, and my parents' selective attention provided the perfect framework for a calculated reveal. I knew the moment would be more than just a confrontation. It would be a spectacle, a carefully orchestrated demonstration of everything I had accomplished without their acknowledgement. I also returned to my journal nightly, documenting every slight and every professional triumph. Each page became a roadmap, a collection of evidence and reflection. I realized that my revenge would require both precision and timing. I envisioned the party where I would unveil the results of my efforts, where every glance, gesture, and word would communicate triumph and retribution. I studied the layout of our family home, noting where I would make my entrance, how I would command attention, and the exact sequence of reveals that would leave my brother and parents speechless. Back home for a holiday weekend, I observed Zayden closely. He strutted through rooms like a king in a hollow kingdom, oblivious to the storms I had brewed quietly. Every boast, every joke, every casual insult he tossed was fuel. I maintained a polite facade, nodding at his antics while my mind mapped the steps of my eventual takedown. I reminded myself that this was not impulsive. I had cultivated patience, strategy, and leverage. The evening passed with subtle tension, the family unaware that I had been planning my eventual reclaiming of authority and respect for years. At night, alone in my childhood bedroom, I reflected on the years of favoritism and neglect. The pain had been real, yet it had forged resilience, intelligence, and ambition. I realized that revenge was not just about teaching Zayden a lesson, it was about reclaiming my narrative, asserting my worth, and demonstrating that years of underestimation could not hold me back. Every achievement I had earned independently was a weapon, and every slight I had endured became fuel. I vowed to make the family understand that the daughter they ignored had become unstoppable, powerful, and unafraid. The following weeks were spent meticulously coordinating the logistics for my return. Invitations to family gatherings were noted, potential media exposure considered, and allies quietly informed. Every detail, from attire to timing, was calculated to maximize impact. I researched local newspapers, social media platforms, and potential real estate announcements to ensure that my achievements would be visible and undeniable. Zayden's assumptions about my passivity made him vulnerable. I realized that the combination of surprise, timing, and undeniable proof of success would create a moment so powerful it would be impossible for him, or my parents, to ignore. Finally, the night of the family party arrived. I stood outside the house for a moment, taking a deep breath, feeling the culmination of years of effort and planning. The lights glimmered through the windows, the sound of laughter spilling out, and I felt a quiet thrill. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the moment where years of meticulous preparation would collide with arrogance, favoritism, and neglect. Every detail of my entry, every glance I would give, every interaction was rehearsed mentally. The storm was ready to break. I stepped inside, poised and confident, immediately commanding attention without a word. Zayden froze mid-laugh, his smirk faltering as he finally registered my presence. The room seemed to shrink, the air charged with anticipation. Eyes shifted to me, whispers spreading like wildfire. I held my head high, letting the impact of my return settle. For years, I had been invisible, dismissed, overlooked. But now, the daughter they had underestimated was standing at the center, radiating power, success, and carefully cultivated dominance. The party was in full swing when I made my first move. I approached the buffet with deliberate calm, letting Zayden catch my gaze in the mirror. His smug expression faltered slightly, the first crack in the armor of arrogance he had worn for years. I felt a thrill at the subtle shift, knowing that even the smallest recognition of my presence was a victory. Each step I took was measured, intentional, every gesture designed to convey power, confidence, and quiet dominance. I let the music and chatter fade into the background as my plan began to unfold silently. Guests began to notice the change, whispers spreading through the room like wildfire. I smiled politely, engaging briefly with distant relatives, letting them sense the shift in energy. Zayden fidgeted nervously, his usual bravado faltering under the weight of my quiet authority. I realized that appearances mattered as much as achievements. How I carried myself, the subtle aura of success, was just as devastating as any financial triumph. Every eye on me was a reminder that the girl he had underestimated had grown into a woman whose presence could not be ignored or dismissed. I made my way to the living room, positioning myself near the family portraits, each a symbol of legacy and tradition. I let my gaze linger on the walls, subtly reminding everyone of the history they had taken for granted. Then, I dropped a casual comment about a recent investment I had made, a high-profile property acquisition that had made local news. Eyes widened, whispers turned to murmurs, and Zayden's mouth twitched nervously. This was the first calculated strike, planting seeds of awareness that my achievements were not only real but undeniable and superior to anything he had accomplished. As the evening continued, I engaged in conversation with longtime family friends, casually dropping references to my growing influence in business and philanthropy. Each mention was subtle, yet pointed, ensuring that Zayden could hear, understand, and feel the threat to his inflated ego. I observed my parents closely, noting the flickers of surprise, pride, and regret. It was clear they were beginning to recognize that their daughter, whom they had dismissed, had quietly become a force of authority and accomplishment. My patience, long cultivated, was beginning to bear fruit. Zayden attempted to interrupt, making a joke about my supposed lack of experience, but I smiled politely and let him finish before calmly detailing a recent project I had led successfully. The room grew silent, every word carrying weight, each fact punctuating the gap between my reality and the illusions he held about my abilities. I watched as his confidence waned, subtle panic in his eyes. It was a delicate dance, provoking awareness without open conflict. The slow, strategic erosion of his self-assured dominance was far more satisfying than any immediate confrontation could have been. I remembered the nights alone, charting my path to this moment, and felt a rush of vindication. Every slight, every overlooked achievement, every moment of invisibility had contributed to this meticulously crafted plan. The emotional intensity one carried was focused, not reckless, anger transformed into strategy. I realized that true revenge required intelligence, patience, and timing. Every glance I cast toward Zayden, every anecdote I shared with relatives, and every subtle demonstration of power contributed to a narrative he could neither control nor deny. The tension escalated further when a family friend asked about my recent projects, genuinely impressed. I responded with a casual, confident tone, outlining my accomplishments in the city and hinting at upcoming deals. Zayden's frown deepened, his attempts at humor falling flat. I felt a thrill of satisfaction, the first signs of public reckoning taking shape. The family began to murmur among themselves, subtle glances exchanged. For the first time, I sensed that my careful planning had created a ripple that could not be stopped, a shift in perception that would climax later in the evening. At the stroke of 10, I excused myself to the balcony, taking a deep breath. The city skyline glittered under the night sky, a perfect reflection of the power I had quietly accumulated. I allowed myself a moment of pride, knowing that the groundwork I had laid over years had created this exact scenario. Zayden's ego, once untouchable, was beginning to crack. My parents, once blind to my potential, were now confronted with undeniable proof of my capabilities. Every detail had been orchestrated to ensure maximum impact, and the crescendo of my plan was approaching. Returning to the party, I noticed Zayden attempting to regain composure, but the effect was minimal. I had anticipated every move, every defensive tactic he might employ. I engaged in a casual toast with relatives, subtly highlighting my accomplishments and contributions without overtly boasting. The murmurs of approval spread, curiosity mixed with admiration, and Zayden's discomfort became palpable. I watched him falter, realizing that the game had shifted. The The carefully cultivated image of superiority he had maintained for decades was unraveling, and I was the architect of that dismantling. The climax of the night was near. I had prepared a subtle reveal, a slideshow highlighting my professional milestones, charitable contributions, and investments, disguised as a casual family presentation. Guests leaned in, captivated by the unexpected display. Zayden's smug grin disappeared entirely as he realized that the girl he had dismissed, the sister he had undermined, had orchestrated a stunning display of competence and influence. My parents' expressions shifted from surprise to awe, finally recognizing the magnitude of my achievements. The tension was electric, the moment unforgettable, and I knew the first phase of my revenge had succeeded. The next morning, I woke with the taste of triumph still sharp on my tongue. Last night's subtle revelations had left Zayden flustered, his arrogance cracking under the weight of my accomplishments. I sipped my coffee quietly, thinking about the moves I had already made and the ones still to come. My journal lay open beside me, pages filled with plans, reflections, and strategies for the ultimate confrontation. The time for subtlety was ending. The moment for a full reveal, a demonstration of power that could not be ignored, was drawing near. My patience had paid off. I called my assistant in Chicago to confirm the details of a major property acquisition I had finalized, a deal worth millions that would make local headlines. This was no ordinary announcement. It was the perfect leverage. I imagined my parents' faces and Zayden's expression when they realized just how far I had risen while they slept in complacency. Each step I took was calculated, every interaction intentionally designed to maximize impact. I wasn't just seeking revenge. I was crafting a spectacle, a lesson in recognition, respect, and consequences for years of neglect. Returning home, I noticed Zayden pacing in the living room, attempting to act casual while visibly tense. I smiled politely, greeting him with a measured tone. His eyes widened slightly, betraying nerves he desperately tried to hide. I could feel the shift in power, the quiet, controlled aura I exuded making him falter. I realized that revenge wasn't about shouting or confrontation. It was about control, influence, and timing. Every gesture, glance, and word now carried weight, subtly chipping away at the confidence he had wielded for decades. Family dinner that evening was tense, each movement and exchange laden with unspoken challenges. I spoke casually about recent successes, highlighting milestones that subtly outshone Zayden's achievements. Guests began to murmur, admiration and curiosity mixing in their glances. I could see my parents shifting in their seats, finally confronting the undeniable reality that their daughter, whom they had overlooked for years, had become a force to be reckoned with. I had turned invisibility into a weapon, and the results were tangible. Every detail of my plan was unfolding perfectly. Zayden attempted to interrupt, a feeble joke about my supposed inexperience. I smiled, letting him finish before calmly explaining a recent business triumph that left no room for debate. The room went quiet, every relative now attentive. He sputtered, searching for a response, but found none that could match the weight of truth. I realized that my revenge was not in humiliation, it was in undeniable success. This approach ensured maximum psychological impact, leaving him disarmed while demonstrating the power I had quietly cultivated over years of patience, resilience, and strategic effort. After dinner, I excused myself to the balcony, letting the cool night air calm the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The city skyline sparkled, reflecting the life I had built independently of the family that had underestimated me. I allowed myself a brief moment of pride, thinking of every slight, every overlooked achievement, every moment of invisibility that had brought me here. My journal rested on the table beside me, filled with plans for the next phase, an even more spectacular reveal designed to ensure that Zayden and my parents would never again doubt my authority, intelligence, or worth. Returning inside, I prepared the slideshow I had promised as a casual family demonstration. The lights dimmed, and I began, projecting images of property acquisitions, charity work, and professional achievements. Gasps filled the room, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Zayden's face paled, his confidence evaporating. My parents leaned forward, their expressions a mix of awe, surprise, and subtle regret. The spectacle was working exactly as I had envisioned, the slow burn of years of planning reaching its crescendo. This was not arrogance, it was a reclamation of power, recognition, and respect long overdue. The room's attention fully on me, I narrated each accomplishment with calm authority. Every detail, every success, every milestone was a calculated strike. Zayden struggled to interrupt, his attempts at humor failing entirely. I felt a thrill at the effectiveness of my strategy, the satisfaction of seeing years of neglect, favoritism, and dismissal unravel in real time. The culmination of patience, planning, and personal growth was manifesting in front of everyone. I realized that revenge was sweetest when precise, deliberate, and undeniable. The family had underestimated me for decades, and now the truth was impossible to ignore. The night continued, tension thick, as I engaged relatives in discussion about my ventures. Subtle hints at future projects, investments, and philanthropic initiatives kept Zayden off balance. The family whispered, questions forming, curiosity rising. I observed every reaction, savoring the incremental dismantling of his ego. My parents' expressions shifted subtly, pride mixing with surprise and perhaps regret. This phase of revenge wasn't about anger, it was about demonstrating the cumulative power of persistence, intelligence, and patience. I felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that my strategic patience was paying off, and the next steps would be even more impactful. The morning after the party, I woke with a sense of controlled exhilaration. The slideshow had done its work. Zayden's facade was crumbling, my parents' attention fully captured, and whispers of admiration filled the house. I moved deliberately through the rooms, observing reactions, noting the subtle shifts in posture and expression. Every glance, every comment, every hesitant word from relatives confirmed that the tide had turned. The storm I had been cultivating for years was no longer theoretical. It was real. I could feel the power settling into my bones, a quiet but undeniable authority. I checked my phone and found messages from professional contacts in Chicago, congratulating me on the deal I had announced. The timing had been perfect, amplifying my family's awareness that my achievements were far-reaching. I smiled quietly, savoring the contrast between Zayden's public bluster and the undeniable truth of my accomplishments. Every detail had been orchestrated to maximize impact, and the first phase of my revenge had been flawless. I knew that my next moves would escalate even further, pushing him to the edge while solidifying my status in a way he could never touch. Walking into the kitchen, I overheard Zayden muttering under his breath, frustration and disbelief tinged in every word. He had not anticipated that I would return with so much control, influence, and undeniable success. I let a small smile play across my lips, knowing that the psychological advantage was mine. I poured a cup of coffee, savoring the warmth, the clarity, and the knowledge that every slight I had endured had prepared me for this moment. Revenge, I realized, was not about vengeance alone. It was about reclamation of power, respect, and narrative. The first confrontation of the day came unexpectedly when Zayden tried to assert dominance over the family breakfast. I listened quietly as he attempted to undermine me, throwing subtle insults about my supposed inexperience. I responded with calm authority, detailing a recent project with precision, evidence, and confidence. Every word was deliberate, calculated to leave no room for debate. The room went silent, the family absorbed by the weight of my accomplishments. I could see the beginnings of panic in Zayden's eyes. For the first time, he realized that the sister he had underestimated was now his superior in influence, power, and intellect. I excused myself to take a call from a Chicago investor, feigning casual conversation but letting Zayden overhear details of new acquisitions and partnerships. His face shifted, a mixture of panic and disbelief crossing features that had previously radiated arrogance. I realized that subtlety was one of the most potent weapons in revenge, the art of letting him hear, understand, and feel the threat without overt confrontation. I smiled internally, knowing that the long years of preparation had created a scenario in which he was vulnerable, exposed, and powerless against the force I had become. That evening, I suggested a family meeting to discuss upcoming renovations and property management. The casual proposal was designed to bait Zayden into the spotlight. As he began boasting, attempting to reassert authority, I presented detailed plans highlighting my leadership, foresight, and financial acumen. Guests leaned in, murmurs of admiration mixing with surprise. Zayden faltered, searching for rebuttals that wouldn't come. I realized that revenge was sweetest when served publicly, slowly, and with undeniable evidence. Every achievement I presented was a reminder that the daughter they had dismissed had grown unstoppable while he had wasted years in arrogance. Late at night, I reflected on the family dynamics that had shaped me. Favoritism, neglect, and subtle insults had been constant companions, yet they had forged a resilience and intelligence that no one could underestimate. I journaled my reflections, documenting each moment, each strategy, each observation that had brought me to this crescendo. Every line, every word, was a testament to patience, preparation, and foresight. I understood now that true revenge required planning, subtlety, and timing. The impact would be undeniable, unforgettable, and irreversible. The following day, I orchestrated a small dinner with select relatives, carefully choosing an audience to witness Zayden's faltering confidence. I let casual remarks about my influence, investments, and philanthropic initiatives flow naturally, knowing each statement would land with precision. The room reacted exactly as I had anticipated. Curiosity, awe, and subtle envy, all directed at me. Zayden's attempts to regain control were futile. I felt a quiet thrill, recognizing that years of being overlooked had provided the ultimate training ground for mastery, strategy, and execution of revenge that was as satisfying emotionally as it was psychologically. Later, I discovered that Zayden had confided in a cousin, expressing fear and confusion over the sudden shift in family dynamics. I smiled quietly, knowing that my reputation and strategic presence had begun to erode his influence without a single overt confrontation. This subtle, psychological dismantling was far more effective than direct aggression. Every observation, every plan, every small victory from the previous years had culminated in this moment. I realized that revenge, patience, and intelligence could achieve far more than anger alone. Zayden's downfall was inevitable, and I had orchestrated it meticulously. As Chapter 6 closes, the tension had reached a new peak. Zayden's facade was fractured, my parents' recognition fully engaged, and I stood at the center, calm, composed, and powerful. The next phase of my plan was ready, one that would solidify my dominance, ensure public acknowledgement of my achievements, and deliver a final, emotionally satisfying revelation. The storm I had built for years was nearly complete, and the stage was set for a confrontation that would leave my family and every observer speechless. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating the determination in my eyes. I reviewed the details of the property acquisitions, philanthropic initiatives, and media features I had prepared to present. Today would be the day that years of preparation, subtle victories, and silent endurance culminated into undeniable dominance. Zayden had no idea what was coming. My parents still hadn't fully grasped the magnitude of my influence, and that ignorance only amplified the eventual impact. Every step I would take today was designed to shatter illusions, cement authority, and deliver the full emotional weight of my carefully orchestrated revenge. I arrived at the family estate with precise timing, dressed in a way that radiated both elegance and power. Zayden was lounging casually, expecting the day to be routine. I let him catch a glimpse of me, ensuring the subtle shift in energy registered immediately. His eyes widened as he tried to maintain composure, but the tension between us was palpable. I carried a briefcase, intentionally weighty, as a signal that the moment had arrived. Every gesture was deliberate, every step measured. He felt it instantly. This was no ordinary visit. It was the beginning of a reckoning he had long ignored. The family gathered in the living room, curious and unsuspecting. I allowed Zayden to speak first, anticipating his attempt to reassert dominance. He boasted about minor achievements, hoping to distract from his growing unease. I smiled politely, listening intently, while mentally counting the seconds until the reveal. When he paused, expecting agreement or acknowledgement, I opened my briefcase and displayed the meticulously prepared portfolio. Photos, documents, and news clippings showcased the full extent of my influence, wealth, and recognition. Every item was a carefully calculated blow to his ego, a demonstration that the girl he had dismissed had become unstoppable. My parents' eyes widened in astonishment as I detailed each investment, each charitable contribution, each professional accolade. Zayden faltered, attempting weak interruptions, but I remained calm and composed, letting the evidence speak for itself. I narrated each achievement with authority, highlighting my independence, resourcefulness, and intelligence. The family was captivated, their admiration mixing with surprise and disbelief. I felt a thrill at the realization that my strategic patience and meticulous planning had created a spectacle that was impossible to ignore. For the first time, my parents truly saw me, the daughter they had overlooked. I then turned the presentation to the city's skyline, showcasing properties I had acquired and developed. The contrast between my achievements and Zayden's bragging was stark, impossible to miss. Every glance, every whisper, every murmur confirmed that my plan was succeeding. Zayden's confidence crumbled, his attempts at humor and deflection failing spectacularly. I observed him closely, savoring the subtle shifts in posture, expression, and voice. This was more than revenge. It was reclamation of respect, recognition, and authority. Every slight I had endured over the years had forged the skills and patience necessary to execute this perfect culmination. Next, I revealed the charitable initiatives I had spearheaded, emphasizing the positive impact on communities my family had never acknowledged. Relatives murmured in admiration, asking questions, seeking details. Zayden's smirk was gone, replaced by a blank stare and visible frustration. My parents leaned forward, their expressions a mix of awe, pride, and guilt. Each revelation was deliberate, each fact chosen to maximize emotional and psychological impact. The room was captivated, and Zayden was powerless to redirect attention. The long-awaited confrontation had arrived, executed with precision, dignity, and devastating effect. The final piece of the portfolio was a media feature showcasing my recognition in the industry. Headlines and interviews highlighted my strategic mind, leadership, and resilience. I watched as Zayden's attempts at interruption became frantic, his voice rising in desperation. I remained calm, letting the montage of achievements dominate the room. Every guest was witnessing the truth I had carefully constructed. I was powerful, influential, and respected, and all along I had been underestimated. The psychological weight of this reveal struck Zayden hardest, leaving him speechless for the first time in years. As the room processed the evidence, I allowed myself a quiet moment of satisfaction. The slow, deliberate dismantling of Zayden's ego was working exactly as planned. My parents, confronted with undeniable proof of my achievements, shifted in their seats, absorbing a mixture of awe, pride, and regret. I realized that revenge wasn't about yelling, blaming, or humiliation. It was about control, timing, and undeniable evidence. I had built a foundation so strong that no argument, excuse, or deflection could diminish its power. The daughter they had ignored was now the central figure, commanding respect effortlessly. Zayden's panic escalated when I casually mentioned upcoming partnerships, future acquisitions, and invitations to high-profile events. Each word was another blow, a reminder that my influence extended beyond their walls, beyond their expectations. He searched for a rebuttal, a way to regain footing, but found none. I allowed a polite smile to play across my lips, knowing that my calm composure amplified the impact of my words. The room was captivated, the family's attention fully on me. My revenge, executed with precision and patience, was reaching its apex. The morning after the family presentation, I woke with a heightened sense of purpose. Zayden's defeat from the night before lingered in the air, subtle but unmistakable. I poured coffee, reflecting on the slow unraveling of his arrogance, and smiled at the thought of the next phase. Today, I would reveal secrets long buried, exposing truths that would leave my parents speechless. I had carefully documented every detail, every slight, every moment of neglect, and now, armed with proof, I could transform whispers of curiosity into undeniable recognition and remorse. The storm was far from over. I approached Zayden first, feigning casual conversation about the previous evening. He attempted bravado, but I caught the subtle tremor in his voice. I leaned in, speaking quietly yet firmly, hinting at the family history he had ignored, the inheritance, the overlooked debts, and the legal documents that had long favored me. His face paled slightly, eyes widening as the realization crept in. I held his gaze, letting the weight of accumulated evidence press upon him. My calm authority was more effective than anger, leaving him powerless to dispute or interrupt. The breakfast table became the stage for subtle revelation. I began recounting long-forgotten agreements, forgotten responsibilities, and moments where my contributions had been dismissed. My parents looked on, stunned, struggling to reconcile the daughter they had underestimated with the evidence of diligence, intelligence, and foresight before them. I detailed each overlooked achievement, every opportunity ignored, and the quiet patience that had allowed me to accumulate influence, wealth, and authority. The air was thick with tension, a mixture of awe, shock, and unspoken guilt, and I reveled in the precision with which my revelations landed. I revealed the legal documents first, casually spreading them across the table. Zayden attempted to interject, claiming ignorance or irrelevance, but I cut him off with calm authority. Each document, each contract, each notarized agreement demonstrated that my efforts had been methodical, deliberate, and powerful. My parents' eyes widened as they began to understand the magnitude of oversight, the depth of neglect, and the sheer determination that had carried me here. Every revelation chipped away at Zayden's confidence while reinforcing my dominance. I allowed the moment to linger, emphasizing subtlety over spectacle, letting truth do the heavy lifting. Next, I presented financial records demonstrating my investments, savings, and real estate ventures. Each figure, each account, each property was evidence that I had quietly built a life of independence and influence. Zayden's attempts to deflect or diminish the impact were feeble, met with calm precision and fact-based rebuttals. I observed the shifts in my parents' expressions, surprise, pride, and subtle guilt mingling. This was more than revenge. It was the reclamation of agency, proof that years of being dismissed could be transformed into undeniable, public triumph. I had orchestrated this revelation with careful attention to detail. I paused briefly, letting the weight of my achievements sink in. My parents' silence was loud, the unspoken acknowledgement of my perseverance filling the room. Zayden's posture had stiffened, panic flickering in his eyes as the realization of his impotence became clear. I continued recounting past slights with precision, events they had overlooked, words they had dismissed, moments of favoritism that had shaped my resilience. I did not exaggerate, but my narrative carried the emotional power of truth. Each sentence, each revelation, was calculated to maximize awareness, emotional impact, and recognition of the daughter they had underestimated. The atmosphere thickened as I transitioned to personal achievements, community projects, mentorship roles, and volunteer initiatives. Each story was a silent critique of their neglect, and a testament to the quiet strength I had cultivated. Guests listened intently, Zayden fidgeting, unable to regain composure. My parents' expressions softened with understanding and pride, tinged with regret. I had transformed their ignorance into recognition, their favoritism into awe. Every revelation was deliberate, designed to leave no doubt about my independence, competence, and authority. I realized that revenge was now fully intertwined with empowerment. As the afternoon progressed, I introduced additional surprises, media features, awards, and invitations to influential circles. The room's energy shifted further, murmurs of admiration growing louder. Zayden attempted weak rebuttals, but each was met with calm, detailed responses, exposing the futility of his resistance. I smiled quietly, savoring the precision of execution. Years of being overlooked had honed patience, intelligence, and strategy. The revelation of secrets was not just about humiliation. It was about asserting control, delivering undeniable proof of worth, and leaving no room for denial. The psychological impact was complete. Finally, I revealed one last element, a planned community project in our hometown, directly tied to the family estate and legacy. I outlined the vision, detailing how it would benefit the local community and preserve the property while demonstrating my leadership. My parents' pride was unmistakable, their voices softening as admiration mingled with reflection. Zayden's panic reached its peak, realizing that his authority and influence were now overshadowed by my calculated success. I allowed the final pause to linger, letting the weight of years, revelations, and planning settle on everyone present. The storm I had been orchestrating for years had reached a crescendo. The evening air was thick with anticipation as I prepared for the family gathering. Every detail had been meticulously planned. Seating arrangements, lighting, even the timing of my revelations. Zayden was already pacing, a nervous energy I had cultivated over months of subtle maneuvers. My parents, unaware of the full scope of what was coming, were seated with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. I entered the room with calm authority, projecting confidence, control, and poise. Every step I took resonated with purpose, signaling the next stage of my plan, the emotional confrontation that would leave no doubt about my dominance. I began by addressing the family directly, recounting the history of neglect, favoritism, and dismissals that had shaped my journey. I spoke with measured intensity, ensuring every word landed with emotional precision. Zayden attempted interruptions, his voice rising in desperation, but I maintained composure. Each anecdote was paired with tangible evidence, documents, photographs, and media mentions, to reinforce truth and impact. I watched as my parents' expressions shifted from surprise to shock to quiet acknowledgement. This confrontation was not only about revenge, it was about reclaiming respect, authority, and recognition that had been denied for decades. Next, I introduced the culmination of my public and private successes. I showcased projects, investments, and philanthropic endeavors, each a direct testament to my perseverance and intelligence. The contrast with Zayden's achievements was stark, impossible to ignore. Guests whispered among themselves, astonished by the scope of my influence. Zayden's bravado crumbled further, his attempts to interject increasingly frantic. I allowed moments of silence to heighten tension, letting the weight of every revelation sink in fully. The emotional impact was tangible. The carefully orchestrated plan of psychological dismantling was achieving maximum effect. I shifted focus to the family legacy, emphasizing responsibilities and foresight that I had quietly assumed. Every property acquisition, every investment, every initiative I had led was tied directly to the family's name and future. Zayden's reaction was telling, a mixture of fear, frustration, and disbelief. My parents' pride began to emerge, but it was tempered by recognition of their past oversight. Each revelation, each demonstration of competence, chipped away at his authority, leaving him powerless to regain the narrative. The room was captivated. The family dynamic had irrevocably shifted in my favor. I revealed a final, carefully crafted surprise. A legal update showing that the family estate and related assets were now effectively under my oversight due to strategic investments and long-term planning. Zayden's face went pale. He stammered, unable to assert control or challenge the facts. The room was silent, every eye on me, every family member absorbing the impact. I spoke calmly, detailing the meticulous work that had led to this outcome, highlighting the contrast between my dedication and his arrogance. The emotional intensity was overwhelming, the stakes higher than ever. As the confrontation continued, I recounted moments of past humiliation and neglect, pairing each memory with evidence of resilience and growth. I did not shout, but each word struck with precision. My parents' expressions softened, showing pride and subtle regret. Zayden's anxiety became almost palpable. He realized that every slight, every dismissive word he had uttered over the years had been met with silent strength and strategy. I felt a quiet satisfaction. The calculated, slow-burning revenge I had orchestrated was unfolding exactly as planned, with maximum emotional and psychological impact. The room's energy intensified as I shared details of my upcoming ventures, signaling that my influence extended far beyond their perception. Guests leaned in, murmuring approval, and glances of curiosity and admiration were exchanged. Zayden's attempts at humor or deflection were futile, each rebuke met with calm, factual precision. I realized then that true revenge was not about anger, It was about dominance, control, and undeniable success. Every revelation, every strategic move, every subtle display of power had been designed to ensure the full recognition of my worth, authority, and capability. I allowed a pause, letting the weight of my achievements and the emotional truths linger in the room. Silence amplified tension, and every shifting expression became a testament to my meticulous planning. Zayden's frustration was clear, his attempts at composure faltering with each passing second. My parents, while proud, were confronted with their own past oversight and favoritism. Every detail, every documented success, and every recounting of history underscored the irreversible shift in family dynamics. The psychological impact was complete, and the stage was set for the final confrontation, the dramatic revelation that would leave no doubt about my supremacy. The final revelation involved a public announcement I had orchestrated, a major philanthropic initiative and property acquisition directly tied to the family legacy. I projected the details on a small screen, letting the magnitude of my influence resonate. Zayden's panic reached a peak. He realized the extent to which he had been outmaneuvered. My parents, visibly moved, acknowledged both pride and remorse. Guests were captivated, fully absorbing the drama unfolding before them. I felt a wave of triumph. The years of patience, planning, and resilience had culminated in an unforgettable emotional climax. The morning light streamed through the estate windows as I prepared for the final confrontation. I could feel the culmination of years of patience, strategy, and quiet endurance building within me. Today, everything would come together. The ultimate revelation, the complete dismantling of Zayden's arrogance, and the public acknowledgement of my achievements. My parents were unaware of the final surprise I had orchestrated. Every detail had been carefully calculated. Timing, presentation, and emotional impact. The stage was set for a climax that would be unforgettable, leaving no doubt of my dominance, capability, and resilience. I gathered the family in the main hall, ensuring Zayden was front and center. I began by recounting the journey that had brought me here, the neglect, the favoritism, the silent dismissals, and every moment I had endured without complaint. My parents' expressions reflected awe, regret, and admiration in equal measure. Zayden attempted to interrupt, but I remained calm, precise, and unyielding. Each word I spoke carried weight, emphasizing the growth, intelligence, and perseverance that had transformed years of invisibility into undeniable power. The tension in the room was palpable, every eye focused on me. Next, I unveiled the final piece of my plan, a public announcement displayed on a massive screen outside the estate, featuring my philanthropic projects, property acquisitions, and media recognition. The images and headlines flashed dramatically, a visual representation of my influence, wealth, and foresight. Zayden's face turned pale as he realized the immensity of what I had accomplished. My parents gasped, their pride mingling with surprise and subtle guilt. The family, friends, and guests who had gathered were captivated, fully absorbing the scale of the revelation. Every detail had been orchestrated to maximize shock, awe, and psychological impact. I turned to Zayden directly, my voice calm but firm. This is what happens when years of neglect are met with patience, intelligence, and resilience. You underestimated me, and the consequences are undeniable. He stammered, searching for words, but none could match the weight of evidence I had presented. The room was silent, the culmination of anticipation, strategy, and revelation hanging in the air. My parents, unable to deny my achievements, nodded subtly, acknowledging the daughter they had overlooked. I felt a quiet satisfaction. The perfect balance of justice, recognition, and empowerment had been achieved. The next moment was my personal triumph. I handed Zayden a document confirming the transfer of key family responsibilities into my control, a formal acknowledgement of authority he could neither contest nor reverse. His eyes widened in shock, frustration, and disbelief. I had executed this quietly, deliberately, and legally, ensuring maximum impact. The room absorbed the drama, whispers and gasps echoing through the hall. My parents' pride and subtle remorse were evident, a testament to the long overdue acknowledgement of my capabilities. The psychological dismantling of Zayden was complete, leaving him powerless and humbled. I allowed a pause, letting the silence and weight of events settle. Every detail of my planning had paid off. The public display, the legal authority, the personal vindication. I recounted past slights, connecting them to the lessons, growth, and eventual triumph I had experienced. The family was captivated, every eye fixed on me, every expression revealing the impact of years of patient strategy. Zayden's attempts at deflection or humor were futile. He could not regain control. I realized that revenge, executed with precision and intelligence, could be both empowering and emotionally satisfying. Then I revealed the final, unexpected twist, a charitable foundation in my name that would honor the family legacy while benefiting the community, funded entirely by my personal assets and strategic investments. The surprise left everyone, especially Zayden, speechless. My parents' expressions softened with pride, admiration, and subtle guilt, while guests whispered in awe. Every element of the plan had been designed to achieve public recognition, personal empowerment, and the ultimate moral victory. Zayden's despair was complete. His previous arrogance and assumptions had been entirely dismantled, leaving only respect for the sister he had long underestimated. I concluded by emphasizing the power of resilience, patience, and strategy. I spoke directly to my parents, highlighting the lessons learned through neglect, favoritism, and underestimation, and the strength gained by enduring and thriving despite it. The room absorbed every word, each revelation a demonstration of intelligence, foresight, and emotional control. I had transformed years of marginalization into undeniable authority and influence. The family dynamic had shifted permanently, and my message was clear. Respect, acknowledgement, and empowerment were now earned, deliberate, and irrevocable. As the final moments of the evening unfolded, I witnessed the subtle changes in Zayden's demeanor, a mixture of humility, awe, and reluctant respect. My parents embraced me, finally recognizing the daughter they had underestimated and the achievements they had ignored. The atmosphere, once tense with neglect and favoritism, now resonated with acknowledgement, closure, and emotional catharsis. I understood that my long journey, fueled by silent endurance and strategic planning, had reached its crescendo. Every slight, every dismissal, every moment of invisibility had been transformed into triumph and empowerment. Before the story concludes, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Marlowe's journey of betrayal, strategy, revenge, and ultimate empowerment has reached its unforgettable conclusion. Don't miss the opportunity to witness how patience, intelligence, and resilience can turn neglect into triumph. The shocking final twist, emotional catharsis, and permanent shift in family dynamics make this story a dramatic, satisfying, and inspiring journey. Stay tuned for more stories of power, revenge, and redemption that captivate, shock, and inspire.